Hello everyone, and a good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Mary Irvin, and I am a member of the education team at the International Testing Agency. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our fifth webinar of 2022, Parents and Guardians, A Guide to Clean Sport. Before I introduce our topic fully and our panelists, please allow me to do some housekeeping. A reminder that we are delivering this webinar in 5 languages. On your Zoom menu, you should see a button called Interpretation, and by clicking on this, you can select a channel with your preferred language with options available in Arabic, French, Russian, or Spanish. Some other housekeeping points. Please do use the chat function to tell us your name, where you're from, and your sport or role. You can also use the Q&A function to ask a question on this topic to one of our expert panelists, and we'll leave some time at the end to address these. Please also note that it goes without saying that whilst we encourage debate, interaction, and questions, we do not tolerate any kind of aggressive behaviour or abusive or racist language. And we trust you will all join us in this spirit of fairness, respect, and integrity. Now, I can see that many of you are already using the chat, so let me pause for a moment just to say hi to a few of you. So hi to Malaysia, Pakistan, to those of you from the International Jump Rope Federation. Hi to you in Mexico. I can see Barbados Wrestling coming through, the education team at UCAD. Hi from India. I can't say hi to everyone right at this precise moment, but do keep those highs coming in, and we'll try and take a little bit of a closer look later on. Finally, note we record all our webinars so that we can make them available on our website and YouTube channels for those of you who are not able to attend the live session. Now, today's webinar is part of our educational monthly series that are publicly available and designed to tackle key anti-doping topics and to raise clean sport awareness. It is my pleasure to introduce our official presenting partner for the second year, Inform Sport. Inform Sport is a global certification program for supplements that batch test products for substances prohibited in sport. As supplement contamination continues to be one of the leading causes of inadvertent doping, we encourage you to check all products before use at sport.wetestYoutrust.com. Also, this educational webinar is delivered with the support of the UNESCO International Convention Against Doping in Sport. So, on to today's topic, and it is my great pleasure to introduce our 2 guest panelists. I would like to invite them to turn on their cameras and offer a huge welcome to them. They are anti-doping experts, and importantly, in the context of today's webinar, are parents themselves. Firstly, I would like to introduce Dr Lubna Sibtain. Lubna is mother to Rubab Raza, who represented Pakistan at the 2004 Athens Olympic Games in swimming. Rubab was 13 at the time of those games, making her the youngest female Olympian from Pakistan, as well as being the nation's first female swimmer at an Olympics. Lubna started her career as a gynecologist before moving to sports medicine, and she has combined this with working at anti-doping tribunals, conducting and monitoring doping controls, and is also actively involved in the anti-doping education of athletes. She is also a member of FINA's Doping Control Review Board, chair of the Anti-Doping and Medical Commission of the Asian Swimming Federation, an IOC certified sport physician, and a member of the ITA's TUE committee. Welcome, Lubna. Hi, Lubna. You're on mute.
Good evening, everyone. I feel blessed, humbled, and thank you so much, Mary, for the generous introduction.
Thanks so much. We'll hear more from you very soon. Next, I would like to introduce Jodi Brown from Drug Free Sport New Zealand's quality team, where she looks after their educators who deliver their education programmes. Jodi has been an educator with them for the past 3 years. Prior to this, Jodi was an international netball player with 61 caps for New Zealand. Her sporting career highlights include being part of the World Championships gold medal winning team in 2003 and a silver medalist at the Commonwealth Games in 2014. She was awarded an Officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit in 2015. And for further context in relation to this webinar, Jodi is also a mum to 3 children, aged 5, 11 and 13. Welcome to the webinar, Jodi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm just going to do a quick introduction in New Zealand's native language for you guys. So, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Taranaki te maunga. So, Taranaki is my mountain. Ko Wanganui, tuku awa. Wanganui is my river. Ko Aotea tuku waka. So, Aotea is my canoe. Ko Ngā Rauru rawa ko Ngāti Haunui a Paparangi are my tribes. Te Aoho is my meeting place and my marae, and my name is Jodi Brown. I'm from Wanganui, New Zealand. Looking forward to this webinar.
Thanks so much, Jodi. And we'll get started with some questions for you and Lubna very shortly. But first, I'm not sure that we really could have more qualified representatives here today. And of course, it goes without saying that although all of us, including myself, hosting the webinar are mums, all of this equally applies to all the fathers and guardians listening in too. Okay, let's get started. So I have put up a slide with a sentence which I will read for the purposes of simultaneous translation. And it is, we are here to tell you about how to protect your child, their career and their sport. And this is the context I would like you to think about during our time together. We often hear about anti-doping only from a list of rules or do's or don'ts. And whilst these are of course critical to know, I also want to really focus on how what we will discuss in this webinar is beneficial to your children in the wider context of their sporting career. And how will we do this? Well, we're going to look at the following. Firstly, the role of parents and guardians in clean sport. We will invite Lubna to share her story. We're going to look at values and behaviours and their role in clean sport. Then a really key part is we want to leave you with some practical tips. So you'll hear about the Drug Free Sport New Zealand education programme for parents and guardians, but we're also going to look at how to navigate the prohibited list, help you understand how to check medications, talk in more detail about supplements, of course, the doping control process testing, and also a few tips about how you could recognise any signs of doping in your children. And as mentioned, at the end, we'll leave some time for any questions that you, the audience, might have. Now, during the webinar, you will also see a number of questions on your screen, and these are going to be highlighted in red boxes. Each time you see one of these, really think if you know the answer to them. They are some of the most important questions you need to know as a parent related to anti-doping. Now, you can self-reflect and think about those questions, or if you want to, you can also type some ideas and suggestions in the chat. We can't go through everything today in one session, but we will highlight the main points and also leave you with links to resources that address each of these answers in a lot more detail. And as mentioned, we will email you the slides with all those links shortly after the webinar ends. So without further ado, here we have our first question in a red box, which is, What is my role as a parent or guardian in clean sport? Let's take a look now at why this is so important. Well, firstly, social science research shows us that the development of a child into a competitive athlete particularly occurs between the ages of 12 and 17, when young athletes are recognised as being talented and, as a consequence, endure intensive level of training and competition associated with pressure to perform. And this is research conducted by Winand in 2018. So Jodi, perhaps I can come to you first for more information and context on this. What are the overall aims and impacts when we think about the role of parents and guardians in clean sports?
Yeah, well, parents and guardians play a huge role in our minors' sports, especially our young athletes. And I guess our overall aim is to part the knowledge and empower those parents to know what their role is within anti-doping education. So what's the role of the athlete in clean sport, and what's the role of a parent in clean sport? And it's important for them to know the information and the why, so that they can support their athletes, the reasons behind why we're doing, providing this education. And also for them to know the content of the education that we're providing. So the content that you're seeing on your slide at the moment are just some of the topics that are covered in the education that we provide. So I think it's more about empowering them with knowledge so that they can do the best for their children or their athletes.
Thanks, Jodi. And let's take a little bit of a closer look at the first bullet point on the screen there, and that is understanding the anti-doping rules. Now, there are 11 anti-doping rule violations, or as you can see in the middle of your screen there, ADRVs. There is a common misconception when thinking about anti-doping rules that it only means finding a banned substance in urine, but of these 11 on your screen, only a few are directly related to sample collection. The others cover things like trafficking, tampering, and possession. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to leave you where you can find out more about each of these 11 ADRVs, as we can't possibly cover all of them in one 1 hour session. It's really a session in its own right just to look at these. However, I do want to highlight one thing in particular, and this is something called the strict liability principle, which means that your child is responsible for any prohibited substance that they use, attempt to use, or found in their system, even if they had no intention to cheat. And parents really need to understand this and what it means for them and also their child's sporting career. Now, WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, set these regulations. And of course, they also have provisions for minors, i.e. those under the age of 18, who come under their protected person definition. However, although minors have further protections because of their age, this principle of strict liability still applies to them and underlines the importance of education for both minor athletes and also for their parents. Now, let's switch focus now, as I would like to invite Lubna to share her clean sport journey. As you heard in the introduction, Lubna is the mother of an Olympian, with her daughter being only 13 when she represented Pakistan at the Athens Olympic Games. Of course, a fantastic achievement for many reasons. But not only that, in the context of today's webinar, Lubna's daughter was also selected for doping control during those games. So Lubna, we are all looking forward to your story. Would you mind starting by telling us about your introduction to elite sports via Rubab's early career and achievements, and then into anti-doping when Rubab was first tested during the Olympic Games?
Thank you so much, Mary. So As a pure academic person, I was introduced to the world of sports on getting married to a passionate sports person. I have two kids who acquired the love of sport from my husband. Rubab, the second one, unfortunately interacted neonatal pneumonia that led to frequent episodes of her being unwell. Being a doctor mom, I was very overprotective about her health and did not allow her to get into any sport except fun games. At the age of 4, I could no longer resist her passion for swimming that gleamed in her eyes each time she was at the poolside watching her brother swim, as opposed to my apprehension about the adverse effect of exertion on Rubab's health once she started swimming. I observed remarkable improvement in her appetite, sleep, overall health, improved academic performance, and above all, a much more joyous and a happy, fulfilled child. My all time dream had come true. This encouraged me to join my husband in fully supporting our daughter's passion for swimming. Rubab was unstoppable thereafter, winning one competition after another, becoming national champion at 9, and at 13 years, she hit the Athens Olympic pool as the first youngest female Olympic swimmer from Pakistan. There, she got picked for her first ever dope test. The experience for her was overwhelming and intimidating. I was not with her at that time. Due to meager resources and our NOC having limited resources, only a small contingent was sent with no female being part of that apart from Rubab. So the following were the intimidations that my daughter had to face. She did not have any representative during the process as she didn't know her right to ask for one. Secondly, giving urine sample in the toilet with huge mirrors all around and a total stranger chaperone watching the entire process of passing urine was traumatic. She was not properly counseled about the scenario prior to the test by the doping team, unfortunately. Providing urine sample in limited time increased her anxiety even more as she was not aware of the option of partial sample provision. Fourthly, handling of sophisticated equipment that she had never seen before. So that was quite intimidating. I was not there. It was just on telephone that she talked to me. So this was the experience.
Thank you, Lubna. I'm sorry to interrupt there. We can hear you, but we can't see you anymore. Would you mind if you're able to pop the camera back on?
Sure, I'm just trying. I think I'll take a minute. Camera off, okay.
Okay, so maybe if you could try unmuting and popping the camera on. And while you're doing that, again, apologies for interrupting, but I think I'm going to know the answer to the next question I'm going to pose. Thank you for describing the first doping control experience of your daughter. So I guess, given the context of what you've just said, she didn't have any anti-doping education prior to this first test, and you weren't really aware of the procedure either.
Yeah. So actually, the only information that Rubab had was the verbal information that athletes are tested. But since in her few years of her career, she saw nobody being tested. Again, I was from the medical profession with no anti-doping awareness by that time and no education into anti-doping, and further had not seen anybody being tested during these years, at least in the competitions that I was there at the poolside.
And what did this prompt you to do?
Well, this was actually a lot of motivation for me, and made a firm decision to dive deeply into the field of sports medicine and anti-doping education.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to our next slide in just a moment. We'd love to hear more from you shortly. The next question I do have in just a few moments is for Jodi. And so perhaps in the interim, Lubna, we could see you really well during the introduction earlier, but let's see if we can try and get you back on camera, because it would be lovely for our audience to be able to see you as well as hear you. Okay. So now I want to switch focus to think about the role of values. So our next slide and question for you is, do you understand the importance of values? Clearly, as parents, we play a crucial role in supporting our children and their development. In the context of sport, we are often their taxi drivers to training and their biggest supporter. And even more specifically, in the context of anti-doping, we also have a major influence in their development as clean athletes and on the values and behaviours they adopt, which in turn can help prevent doping. So Jodi, can I come to you first on this one? What do parents need to know about this question?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, first of all, I would start with the why. Why is it important for parents to know about this? And really look at the clean sport versus anti-doping message. So coming from that clean sport is bigger than anti-doping, and building and understanding the values-based clean sport. So our education in New Zealand to youth and to minors and to younger athletes is really targeted around values-based versus the anti-doping message that we potentially deliver to more elite athletes. I think one of the first things is for parents to understand and have the knowledge that the reasons why your athletes or your children could be tempted to make some poor choices. And those might be things like social media influences. They might be role models that they've seen on TV or in articles or on social media again. There's been research out there to say that body image is another one that young ones see as well. And then also for our younger athletes is dealing with the performance and outcomes. So dealing with the pressure around those, around wanting to be the best, around wanting to win, and to focus on outcomes like winning. So that's where the temptation might come in. Then it's really important, I think, for us to have a foundation. So for us to educate athletes, children, athletes, support personnel, so that we can prevent them from making those poor choices, so that we can instill those values in them and that knowledge in them, so that we can almost prevent what's going to happen, and reinforce the values aspect of the positive behaviours that lead to athletes making good decisions. And then, like we've talked about, those core values. So really, our focus is empowering them with age-appropriate information to ensure that they are making good choices in clean sport. We want to build resilience so that they can deal with whatever sport dishes out to them. You know, sport has so many challenges, so many setbacks, accomplishments. There's a lot of decision-making on and off the sports field or court. And also, I think that value of discipline. So to know what is right and what is wrong, and help build those skills in them so that they feel empowered to speak out, and they feel empowered to have that knowledge to know what is right and wrong and to make those good choices. So yes, it's about, for me, it's about the why, and why is it important for parents to know this so that they can support their athletes.
Thanks, Jodi. And I know we're going to have values and behaviours sort of interspersed through everything that we do in anti-doping or clean sport education. Lubna, maybe I can come to you on this one as well. And just before I ask this question, perhaps when we move to Jodi again, we think the issue is not the camera on Zoom, but somehow the camera on your computer seems to have switched off this time. But first up, because hopefully we will be able to hear you answer this one at least as well, what would you like to add to this question?
So, Mary, is this question for me or Jodi?
Yes, this one's for you. I know that values is something you feel very strongly about as well. So is there anything you would like to summarize from what Jodi said?
Sure. So for me, values are actually, it is the moral compass created during initial years of life, and it is actually influenced by the parental behavior or a guardian who is closest to the child. So it develops within first 1 or 2 years. So it is very important for us as parents or guardians to focus on our own values, such as honesty, integrity, because whatever our values are, our behavior will be depicting those values. And remember, kids follow what they see, not what they are told. So we have firstly to prioritize and focus our own good values. Then giving values of honesty, hard work, excellence is actually going to make our child morally so strong that nobody and no thing will stop them or confuse them in hour of making tough decisions, such as drugs in today's context. So my dear parents, though I'm sorry you can't see me, but I'm sure you can hear me. I deeply understand and realize all the struggles that every parent out there is making for making an athlete. Maybe long hours of waiting while your kids are training. He might be in the warm water pool and you might be walking every length of the swim in the harsh winter, taking care of the diet, their sleep, academics, sacrificing your own routines, maybe changing jobs, working hours, prolonged working hours, etc., etc. But during all this, remember, you are already on the path of infiltrating good values in your child that guarantee health, success, and creating an excellent human being that no institute or university can make. I think it's not a great price to pay. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Lubna. Yeah, so much to think about for us parents. But I'd like to pause on the values there and let's get practical now. So Jodi, maybe I can come straight back to you again and ask how you operate at Drug Free Sport New Zealand, supporting parents and young athletes.
Yeah, look, I think we're very proud of our model that I'm going to explain to you that you can see on the screen now. And I'm sure that many countries have models that they can adapt around this. But for those that you're watching overseas, the picture that you're seeing is what we call a traditional marae. So that's a house, it's a meeting place where people go to do a variety of activities. And in New Zealand or Aotearoa, our youth education program is centred around what we call Te Fari Tapafa, which is the heading for this picture that you're seeing on screen. And it's a bicultural approach that focuses on the holistic approach to clean sport. So we focus on 4 aspects. So taha tinana, which is your physical health. So looking at the physical health of an athlete. We focus on taha hirinaro, which is the psychological and emotional health, so the emotional component. Then we focus on taha whānau, which is our family, the community that that athlete is working in, and the social groups that that athlete is working on as well. And then our last one that we focus on is taha tikanga. So that's looking at the practices associated with being a clean athlete and how they implement that in clean sport. So then we add things like up the top there, you've got the word mana, M-A-N-A, and that is when we, that's another word for pride or honor or respect. And that's where we focus on the integrity of clean athletes and clean sport. And then right down the bottom is whenua, and that's all about grounding. So it's where we put our values in. That's where we ground to our New Zealand roots and the culture of clean sport. So it's just a holistic way and an approach that's something that is unique to New Zealand, that when we go into schools or when we are working with young athletes, they seem to really grasp and have a look at. And I think it's an awesome way of putting a different spin on it so that they can see it in our own culture.
Thank you. Yes, and I'm sure there's ways that this could be adapted to fit other country needs as well. And in parallel, your organisation has also developed a parents' guide, as have other NADOs as well. But perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about your one.
Yeah, look, I think there is a lot of information that you can access in terms of education. Most anti-doping organisations have websites, so that's a great start to find key messages and information. And I guess our Drug Free Sport New Zealand website, that is all informed by doctorate research on our website. We, like Murray mentioned, we have developed a parents' guide, and that was developed in collaboration with WADA, so World Anti-Doping Association, and awesome. So we used to have pamphlets that we gave out. We've been environmental friendly now, and it's on our website. And like Murray mentioned, there is a lot of NADOs that do have that information. And it is a really valuable resource to back up the education workshop that we go in and run as educators. We have to be mindful that these athletes are young, so their ability to listen, understand, and take in everything can be a bit mixed sometimes. So that resource is excellent to back up and reinforce. Clean Sport 101 level 1 and 2 is available on the Drug Free Sport website, and that's an awesome opportunity for parents and athletes to learn and understand together. So it's an online course. Again, many NADOs and anti-doping organisations will have that available. Comprehensive e-learning courses you can complete together, work through all facets of the anti-doping. And I really want to stress that every education is free. Okay, so it should be free for all athletes. It's accessible, especially if you go to our website, but I know there's other websites as well. And it's there so that the information is readily available. We do not want parents and athletes missing out because they see a barrier to this. So it is all free. And like most organisations around the world, education and educators will be doing an awesome job.
Thank you, Jodi. And one of the things we're going to leave everybody with at the end is actually a link to where parents listening can find out who their NADO is, their National Anti-Doping Organisation. So they can immediately take a look, see if their NADO has relevant information on there. And if not, for example, as Jodi's mentioned, the New Zealand one is there, it's available, it's free for anybody to take a look at and really be able to start educating themselves. So let's stay with this theme of practical advice and think about another key area, and that is prohibited substances and methods, which ties back to the principle of strict liability that we looked at earlier. So it's time for our audience to think about the next question. Write in the chat as well if you'd like to answer. And our next question is, do you know what substances are prohibited in sport? Well, the first thing to know is that WADA publishes a document called the Prohibited List that outlines prohibited substances and methods, and it's available on the WADA website. So Lubna, maybe I can come back to you for this one. This list can look a bit daunting to start off with, but how would you advise a parent to best navigate this?
Thank you, Mary. I will try to explain it. I'm sure you can hear me properly?
Yes.
Though you cannot see me, right?
Correct.
So actually prohibited list seems to be quite confusing, but we have to understand that in order to keep pace with scientific and medical developments and latest doping trends, this is a highly advanced sort of list of all the prohibited substances, which is made by consultative process by leading consultants throughout the year. And a list is published by WADA on its website by 1st of October every year. It gets in effect from 1st of January. So just to make it simplify for the parents to understand, there are basically 3 categories in which these substances are divided. So firstly, the substances and methods which are prohibited at all times in and out of competition. Secondly, substances, methods prohibited during competition only. Thirdly, substances prohibited in particular sport, just during competition. So this would make it probably easier to understand. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's some really key advice there, to immediately think about it in 3 sections. And I think that immediately makes it the concept easier to understand and grasp. Now, Lubna, if we stick with you for the next one as well, it's one thing to know that this list exists and how to navigate it. But how do you take this theory into practice, really? And how could you check an actual medication that your child may be using and make sure there is nothing prohibited in it?
Sure.
This leads us on to the next question. You can see on the screen here. I would like all the parents listening to see if they can answer this question. And I'll pass it back to you, Lubna, to give us some tips on this.
Sure. So most of the parents keep some emergency use medicines at home. We have to make sure they don't contain any prohibited substances. For example, the over-the-counter medicines for flu, cough medicines may contain such substances. They have to ensure that whenever the GP advise any medicine to the child, you have to inform the GP that the child is an athlete and there are prohibited medicines that he or she cannot take. But if GP is not in knowledge of that and medicine is prescribed, so what as parents you can do is, there are websites which are available for the European and Canadian countries, Australia as well. For example, there's a website called Global Draw. So what they can do is they can type the name of the medicine, the pharmacy from where it was bought, and just enter that in a day on which it was bought, enter into the login the website, and it will actually give the presence or absence of prohibited substance, and we would also classify the substance so that it is very clear the medicine is allowed for the child to take. Secondly, I would really advise the parents to keep a list of all medication the child is taking, either on your phone or on your diary, ensuring that they have been checked completely, and even by chance or by accident, nothing prohibited goes into the athlete's body. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Yes, and we've typed into the chat there one of the websites that you mentioned, globaldraw.com, and this plus other useful links are going to be sent to you after the webinar. Okay, let's stay with a similar theme and also take a look at supplements. So our next question is, do you know what a supplement is and what their risks are? Now, Jodi, coming back to you for this one, it's quite a complex area, and I know it's an area that you get a lot of questions about from parents, and these questions often come up in your education sessions. Perhaps you could expand on this area and also let us know what you advocate at Drug Free Sport New Zealand.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're exactly right. Supplements is the topic that probably gets the most questions in an education setting. And also generates some concern sometimes as well. At Drug Free Sport New Zealand, we encourage a food first approach, and encouraging them to make some really good decisions for health purposes. I guess there's going to be a variety of reasons why people choose to take a supplement. Some people might be deficient in the area, some people might need them for other reasons. But I think the biggest thing that we advocate is that you do get that professional advice around that. Supplements might seem easier for parents that are potentially time poor. They might be more accessible to those that are fortunate enough to be able to be in a position to purchase them. And sometimes they're there just as a quick fix, as opposed to actually doing that preparation and taking that time to prepare some whole food. Also, I think some of the traps that we fall into as parents sometimes is that quite often the research based around supplements is, the research or the trials is tested on adults. And we've got to remember that children are not mini adults. Okay, it's not same for same. So around that ability to make decisions around that and get some advice as well. It's really important. There's multiple decisions to take into account when you are choosing a supplement, okay, and why you would. Certification is only one consideration to a list of many when deciding what to do. We're very lucky at Drug Free Sport New Zealand that we have got a supplement decision-making guide on our website, and that's for people that are not in a position that don't have access to nutritionists to be able to get that advice. So that's been put together with Drug Free Sport New Zealand experts and High Performance Sport New Zealand's nutritionists, and that be able to act as a guide to be able to help you make some really good informed decisions.
Thanks, Jodi. And it's great, again, that parents can sort of navigate and use this decision making from your website if they don't have access to other information. Or like you mentioned, indeed, sort of a registered nutritionist too. I think just to sort of summarize this topic, it's one we get lots of questions about as well, not just from parents, but from lots of elite athletes and other people involved in sport, is that we would always recommend doing a risk-benefit analysis. And that if you do choose to use a supplement, then please do make sure that it is batch tested. And I'm just going to change the slide here so that you can see some websites on your screen here, just to several companies that do batch test supplements. So if you are thinking about using them, then please do check them on here too. Okay, let's move on to another area that we get a lot of questions about as well, and that is the doping control process. So our next question to you is, do you know how the doping control process works? So I'd like you to have a think about that and really understand if you know all the rights and roles and responsibilities of an athlete when it comes to doping control. And related to this, we're going to show you some questions now that are some of our most frequently asked questions when it comes to the testing process, particularly from young athletes and their parents. And these include, does someone really watch me pee? Do I have to provide a sample? Can I take someone with me? And then, of course, from the parents' perspective, are there modifications to the process for minors? So let's address some of these. And again, a reminder that we will leave you with links to more information at the end of the webinar too. So Lubna, if I can come back to you on this one. You are now a doping control officer as well. You weren't at the start of your daughter's career. And perhaps we can think about, first of all, the first question from the previous slide. Does someone really have to watch the athlete pee? And perhaps you can describe what's happening in this picture here for us.
Yeah. So as you can see, there is a chaperone who is one of the doping control personnel, and whose duty actually, and it is of the same gender. If it's a female, it's going to be a female chaperone. If it's a male, then it's going to be a male chaperone. And the duty of chaperone is to see the urine sample coming out of the body of the athlete. So for that, athlete is asked to expose the body up to the torso and down below the trousers, up to the down in the thighs, and roll the sleeves upwards, so that there's a clear view of urine being passed from the athlete's body. So yes, the answer is yes to the first question. Should I go ahead?
Yes, so I think in summary there, really, I think to try and reassure young athletes in particular, they're allowed to have someone of their choice coming into doping control with them. Sure. But it's not that person who watches them. Somebody does have to watch UP, but that is the doping control officer.
Sure.
Okay. So Jodi, I know you get a lot of questions in your education sessions about this as well. What else do parents and young athletes need to know about this process?
Yeah, look, I think our job around telling them is informing them of the process, so that if it does happen to them, they're not taken by surprise. They know what it's going to happen. We reinforce the message that it's not a nice process to go through, but we also empower them that there is transparency and it's equal for everybody. So whether you're, an Olympic gold medalist or whether you are a younger, athlete, the process is still the same. We really focus on their rights and responsibilities that they have, and that their parents have as support people in that role. So around, the role that the parent can have in this situation. And yeah, it's about, I guess, just empowering them to know that they do have rights and responsibilities as an athlete throughout this process. I guess the other thing is that many anti-doping organisations or at major events, they might have specific guidelines or recommendations around testing minors. So it's usually on, like it's on our website, it's usually on others' websites as well. So it's a really good idea to check those so that you're aware of them as a parent, and so that you're going into an event or, a particular country, what their specific guidelines and recommendations. But basically it's comfort in knowing what the process is going to be, that they have rights and responsibilities throughout that process, and that there's no surprises for them, even though it's a horrible situation to be in, that they know what they are going to expect to happen.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, so I guess, again, in summary here, we can say that, if it's your first time being tested, and especially if you are under 18, you really should have someone with you in addition to the doping control officer. And it's about making sure that athletes understand that that is one of their rights, as well as understanding their responsibilities too. And as Jodi was talking, we just popped up on screen there, it's just some of the rights and responsibilities that athletes should be aware of when it comes to the testing process. Now, time for our second last audience question of the webinar, and this is a very serious one, but it's important that we do address it. And that is, how do you know how to recognise the signs of doping? This is also an area that Drug Free Sport New Zealand talk about in their Parents Guide too. So perhaps if I come straight back to you on this one, Jodi. We don't have time to do this topic justice. Again, this could be a whole session in its own right. But perhaps you could point out a few key highlights for parents to be aware of.
Yeah, exactly. We do not have time to go through all of them, but we do have lots of signs in our Parents Guide that is really handy for you. I think that the kind of top 4 that we've picked out is the use of supplements without any sensible reason to use them. So just using just because they can. And, you know, potentially maybe using multiple supplements. They might use a pre-workout, then they might have protein powder, then they might have a protein bar, and then they might have some, I don't know, vitamin C tablets at night kind of thing. So just because they're there and just because they can take them. So their use of supplements without any sensible reasons, probably a big one. Relying on untrustworthy and misinformation sources. Okay. And again, social media is massive and a big one for this. So mine is seeing, you know, superstars in particular, you know, using a particular substance or supplement and thinking that they would get the same benefits from taking it, or assuming that the information that they're reading or seeing is truth. So really good idea as parents is to ask questions. So how do you know that's true? How do you know that will work? What information have you seen that shows you the results that, you know, potentially you're getting? So asking questions around that. Setting unrealistic goals. So mine is thinking that they have to take a particular substance to get a particular result. Or, you know, dare I say it, people thinking that they're better than they are. So, you know, a particular competition where, you know, they want to get first, but their PB is ever being like top 16 kind of thing. So that those unrealistic goals and expectations. And probably the last most important one as well is engaging in that risk behavior. So athletes or children that are comfortable with like taking medications, maybe popping pills, maybe vaping, maybe smoking, they see supplements or maybe other substances like nothing out of the ordinary. They don't think it's a risk for them because they've been taking this other stuff. So they're engaging in that risk taking and their ability to, you know, to potentially get found out. So like Mary said, there's lots in that resource that we've got, but they're probably the top 4 that we kind of have identified.
Thanks, Jodi, for trying to summarize, I know, this complex topic in, you know, in just 60 seconds. And maybe the same question to you as well, Lubna. What are your thoughts from a medical doctor perspective?
Although Jodi has very nicely put everything together, but I'll just be sharing my experience in this regard. As a medical doctor, I would just tell you there are 4 pillars of health that are disturbed whenever such a drug is taken by the child. So sleep, number 1, it could be loss of sleep or sleeping more than usual. Appetite, the child will actually maybe suffering from loss of appetite or some changed things that he or she would be wanting to eat or drink. There would be disturbance in the mood in the form of irritability, restlessness, and you will see some changes in the pattern of physical activity, maybe becoming very lazy and sleeping for long hours, not keeping himself alone. So these are the things that have to be kept in mind, Mary.
Okay, and do you have some closing words? We've just animated the slide here too.
Thank you. Thank you. So at the end, I would just, after having told all the gloomy picture about the drugs and what impact can they have on our kids, being a concerned mother and a parent who understands struggles of the parents that they are making for bringing up and not just a child, but an athlete and a child, you know. So it's challenging. So I just want to give good news to the parents and some hope also. So there is a magic pill. The secret ingredients of that magic pill are parental attachment, unconditional love, being a resource person for the child, praising effort, not the result, connection before correction. So if these secret ingredients we can use as parents, I can guarantee you this magic pill is going to give results that no other drug can give for enhancement of performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Lubna. Now I'm going to whiz through the next couple of slides. Our last question of the day is, do you know how to educate yourself? And in the next 2 slides, we have links to a lot of the resources that we promised answers to those questions that we've talked about. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A box, so I'd really like to address those before the end of the webinar. But here we have links to different NADO websites, information on our website, information on the WADA website. And all this being said, it all echoes what Jodi mentioned earlier about those resources being out there and being free and accessible. It's just about knowing where to find them. So I hope you find all of these useful when they come into your inbox in just a little while. But let's move to the Q&A section now. We have a couple of questions there already. So Lubna and Jodi, I will come to you for some responses. The first one is from Michael. I think it's actually more of a sort of statement, but maybe you could give us some thoughts on this. Maybe we start with you, Lubna, first. Michael says, totally agree with Jodi that the pressure on young athletes from social media in terms of body image and performance is huge, particularly in power sports such as rugby. I have real concerns that young athletes are tempted to take steroids and other controlled substances to increase strength and body mass. While testing is commonplace at elite level, there is a need for a testing regime and education program through the youth system. So maybe we focus on education here, and I think this comes back to values that we talked about earlier. Lubna, what are your thoughts on this?
Actually, Mary, this is very important question, and nothing more can emphasize the importance of education of these youth, and especially creating role models out of our athletes, because even in the clubs and at a lower level, where because there's a lot of awareness regarding bodybuilding and all those, and kids are following their heroes, our athletes. This is why it's so very important that we have to educate and share the stories of all the athletes that in the previous 10 years, even athletes are coming up who have been caught inadvertently into doping or different ways. Now they're telling their stories. So listening and then communicating these stories to our youth about the hazards and the side effects of all those things is very, very important in this. Yeah.
Thank you, Lubna. And I'd really like to squeeze in the last one before the webinar ends. And this is a question for you, Jodi. And the question is from Louise, and it's, how do you approach anti-doping education to very young athletes, i.e. under 13s, as opposed to older ones? And do you think it's better done through the parents or guardians or by using child-friendly educational resources?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know, just obviously being an educator myself in New Zealand, we have 4 different presentations that we use when we go out that range from elite athletes right down to what Louise is talking about here in terms of the younger ones. And for us, it's about engaging and getting them involved and getting them interactive. So the more that we can get them involved, engaging, interactive throughout the session, the more that they're likely going to be able to remember it and remember the content that we are delivering. Really, really important, as I mentioned earlier, is to have that be really age appropriate. So we don't want to scare them about what anti-doping is all about, but we want to make sure that it comes from that really values based, so that they it means something to them. We really, really encourage and hope that parents and athlete support personnel attend. That's not always the case. So that's when our resources like the parent guide and all the other resources that we have on our website is another way of following it up and doing that. And yeah, I think for me, it's just about I think the buy-in that you have around being athlete focused, being value focused, getting them interactive is massive, and they remember that, and that always comes back to that.
Thank you both so much. That's us out of time now. I know we could talk about this for a long time, but if you have any questions that we weren't able to address during the session, please do reach out to us at education@ita.sport. I'd like to say a massive thank you to our two panelists for joining us today and giving us all those fantastic tips and thoughts from their expertise. I've mentioned several times, you will receive the slides shortly with all the links. You're also going to receive a link to a very short survey. It would be great if you could spend 60 seconds or so completing that. We'd love to hear your feedback. And finally, if you'd like to hear more updates from the ITA, then please do sign up for more information using the QR code on your slides now. So once again, thank you to both our panelists, really appreciate it, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.